Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to another episode of the Vertical Stars Podcast fourth season. My loyal listeners, thank you for your continued support. It's an amazing episode because Dave Metzger boards the mothership to discuss the score to Mufasa. Now, come on board as we go traversing the stars. Hi, Mr. Metzger. Thank you for coming to Vertical Stars Podcast.
Hey, well, thank you very much for having me here. Appreciate it.
It's been my pleasure. Can't wait to see Mufasa. That really is the big movie for the holiday season, right? Like that's the one everyone's talking about.
Well, at least I'm talking about it.
So I always start off with a question of inspiration. So what inspired your love for music and who your earliest influences?
Yeah. Well, I actually started writing music when I was 12 years old, and I got really fortunate. I uh, ended up in seventh grade in a class, choir class in just regular public school that with the teacher was a composer of music for one of the best known in the United States for choral music at that point for junior high kids. So she was sort of my inspiration. And I just started writing because I saw that a lot of the music we were singing was what she had written. So I would write stuff and I'd take it into her, and she'd give me pointers and tips and took me under her wing, and that kind of just launched everything. And from that point on, for 50 years or so, about all I've been doing is writing music. So
That's awesome. And you've had a very impressive long career. So if memory serves, you started first as they call it orchestrator. Is that correct?
that's right. Yeah, I've most of my career I've actually been known as an orchestrator or song arranger. Yeah. Yeah.
So what does that mean differently than composer?
Yeah. So, and it's a great question because, it's a lot of people have no idea when they hear orchestrator, what does that really mean? So, and I always love kind of having a chance to explain it a little bit. So, in its basic form, an orchestrator takes a piece written by the composer and writes it out into the big full score that then, a copyist then prepares parts from, and the musicians play those individual parts. So, but that can kind of entail a whole wide range of responsibilities. In the best case form, the composer will give you a very detailed sketch of all the, exactly all the harmonies and all the, counter melodies and things like that, and extremely detailed what instruments they want to play what. And nowadays it's all done in a computer, with a sequencer. And so it's kind of a different, but a composer will, some composers will write very detailed sequence parts. And so at that point, the orchestrator's job is essentially just to take those and translate them into a printed score that then can be read by the musicians and recorded with. On the other extreme of this spectrum is a composer who'll write very sketchy things and just like a piano part, maybe even, and then it's up to the orchestrator to decide all of the other elements of the score, and that can be including writing counter melodies or harmony parts or whatever. So, and it's again a very wide range of composers. Some, will fall in the middle of that. They'll give you a pretty good idea, and but it still leave it up to you to kind of make a lot of the main decisions. So, and I'll just sort of add that by being having spent so much of my time being an orchestrator in my career, on the compositional side, I'm very detail oriented, and I'm very specific about what I want to have. And so I'm on the far range of composers who write everything explicitly, all the notes when I'm writing in a sequencer, everything that I want on the printed page is very detailed in my sequences. So I hope that gives some idea.
So, I mean, I find what composers do absolutely fascinating. As someone who I've never been a composer, obviously myself, but I find what they do absolutely fascinating. When you're composing, okay, are you hearing each instrument of the part? Are you hearing just like a melody that you're then figuring out which instrument best hits that note? How are you hearing it in your head before you put it on the page?
Yeah, there's actually a couple of different ways I look at it. One is the main takeaway for me is I've never been really proficient on any instrument. So I even though in the background you can see I've got guitars and stuff, and I use those in a rudimentary way to help me voice parts for different instruments. But so what I've always done, starting in 12 years old, I've got this ability, I guess, I hear the music in my head, and I was able to write directly to the page without any kind of an instrument as a go-between. So I
Hmm.
could hear it, and then I can write it on a page without any. any problem. I mean, that's what was the fastest and most natural. If I actually try to use a piano or something to write with, it slows me down. And so now in today's world, everything is done. It has to all be mocked up. Everything you write has to be mocked up for the director to hear and hear what the music's going to be beforehand. So at this point, I use the computer as a tool, and I write into that. But I'm very I've always been very fortunate to where I really do hear the music in my head before I even start and touch anything else. But it is then the process that I go through or use is I'll come up with the melodies first without really worrying about the orchestrational colors. And so the first part of a film process for me is I'll try to get my melodies all in order for like the different characters, the themes like that. And I look at it as kind of like building a house. So the melodies for me are the foundation. And then once I have that set, I'll start building the layers on top of it, which will include the orchestral colors and such.
We're gonna rewind in my head the conversation just for 2 seconds because you said something that's kind of interesting. I don't think I've heard before. See, what I love about doing these interviews is that I learn so much in just talking to someone who obviously is a professional, successful person on a particular area. Now, you use the phrase musical colors. What does that mean?
Yeah. So colors, in my interpretation, are the different instruments. So, and it could be combinations of those instruments. So, for instance, a very common combination would be so cellos and French horns. And so that's going to be a color. When you have them playing a unison line, that is a certain color. But if you were then having an oboe play that line, it would be a whole different color.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the joys I get all the time in my whole career has been like thinking of these colors and working with them, and it's kind of like painting in a way, I suppose, but that's what I'm referring to when I'm talking about colors.
It's just like I said, it's just absolutely fascinating listening to you talk about your profession. It is a wonderful one, and for me, I'm a writer, like a comic book writer. I always kind of wonder if the writing process of music is the same as the writing process of a piece of fiction, where you're developing themes, you kind of have characters within your themes that you're focusing on. Characters evolve, there's an arc, things of that nature.
Yeah. I think it's very similar. I mean, my goodness, you just described my work, but exactly. And so I think we're very kindred in that regard. So yeah,
Mm.
cool.
And right now you're composer of, like I said, I mentioned the big film of, to my opinion, of the season, which is Mufasa, which was everyone's talking about. So how did you get involved in Mufasa, and how did your experience on The Lion King, not the animated Lion King, but the somewhat CGI animated Lion King? I guess that's maybe the better way of phrasing this one. How did that help you better understand the characters and themes moving into Mufasa?
Yeah. And I've had a really long connection to The Lion King. It's 27 or 28 years now, I think, is what I've been living in this world, the Lion King world. And my first real exposure was I was the orchestrator of the Broadway version of The Lion King, so the stage version. So that was a very intense experience for me, where it was about a year long process of where I did nothing but live Lion King. So it was really great. Talking about learning experiences, that's what this is all about for me. Is it's the cool thing about what we do is that you can never know it all, right? It's a forever horizon of learning experiences. And the Lion King for me was very much that. I learned so much about African percussion and just different instruments that are used in that continent. And so it was a great chance to really just learn. So that was really what it was, kind of like just immersion learning, right? On the sound of the Lion King. But because of that, and I'm still involved with the stage version now, I'll still go around every couple of years to look at the different companies and make sure the music is sounding right. So really, it's been a 28-year life for me living in the world of the Lion King. And so, but it's just um, case of learning different the colors of that universe, and then now in this new version of Mufasa, then putting that knowledge to work, because it was very important for us to have a touch touchstone or a touching point for, people who watch the film to know that they're in the world of the Lion King, musically. So it was really important for me to utilize also, some of those incredible themes that Hans Zimmer wrote, in the original 1994 animated version. But also it was very important for the director and the studio to have a new identity as well. So Mufasa wasn't just going to be a exact recreation of the Lion King. So that was another cool part of it for me is I got to write new melodies for the new characters, and then also some new melodies for some of the old characters as well. So it was kind of this big giant puzzle, right? Is what I was faced with was trying to put it all together and make sure that people experienced the Lion King, but also the film had its whole new voice too as well. And part of that was the animation, right? The CGI animation. Honestly, when people see it, I think they're going to be just stunned by it because it just has this look that is unlike, the 2019 version, the remake and all. It just feels very human to me, right? Or very realistic, I guess is a better way to put it. And so I'm really excited for people to have a chance to actually see the film too. It's very beautiful.
I think that part I found so fascinating about what you're doing for Mufasa, and probably what you're doing with Mufasa for as a musical entity, right? Um, I kind of feel like when you watch the original Lion King, okay, Mufasa is portrayed almost godlike in his perfection. He's all good. He's all knowing.
Mhm.
He is a flawless individual. Mufasa, you have to develop, as you meant to use your words, colors, a more of the spectrum of personality of this individual. So musically, you do have to borrow from that original, almost like almost like godlike, perfect being, to
Yep,
this actual individual that people can identify with. So how do you
exactly.
take those themes from Mufasa, from Lion King, and
Mhm.
kind of radiate them out to give a
Mhm.
full character?
That's, I mean, just a really wonderful question you've just asked. I mean, it's really got a lot of depth to it. So, and I'll do my best to address it, as well as I can. Um, you know, Absolutely true about Mufasa as a almost godlike character in the original. But so that's one of the cool things about this film is it's a prequel. We're really getting the backstory of Mufasa and how he developed and what he was exposed to as a young cub and the obstacles he had to overcome in that development and relationships he had with people along the way, well, with animals along the way. And we're introduced to the characters that you eventually do see in the Lion King. And so we get to meet Sarabi and how their relationship developed. We get to see Zazu, Rafiki. We see all along, when he was and some of the trials that Rafiki faced when he was, a young being. And so a cool thing I got to do musically was not only use these great, Mufasa themes and break them down a little bit so that they're not just necessarily hitting you over the head all the time. Sometimes they're subtly tucked in musically. I've done that. But another cool example is the songs written in the film by Lin Manuel Miranda, obvious genius and great songs. And one in particular is a song called I Always Wanted a Brother. So I utilize themes from that song. I would drop them in sometimes when Mufasa and Taka are together, and I try to use musically that as a tool for showing their development of their relationship along the way, and it morphs and transforms throughout the film along the way and turns into different things. But so again, it's just all these cool puzzle pieces I get to work with.
Well, like that, I mean, it's just it sounds so fascinating, and I really do like how you're also analyzing it as well on your end. And as much as Mufasa is the perfect being in Lion King, Scar is the ultimate evil. He is, I mean, they give him some, I mean, you understand why he's evil in Lion King, but for the most part, his development is he's the bad guy. He's, the jealous
Mhm.
bad guy. I assume in Mufasa, they once again delve into him as well. And when you're thinking about him as a character and the themes you're using for him, how did you use what we know of Scar, what we know Scar is going to become
Mhm.
to develop his music?
Yeah, and the way I looked at it was we I don't think it's a surprise. I hope it's not that we meet Taka as a young cub. Both Mufasa and Taka are young cubs when they first meet, and again, I hope I'm not putting any spoilers out there. And but anyway, so my approach to Taka was to give him this joyful innocence because that's really what he is in the beginning. He's this lovely. Loving character, that actually uh, has a pretty large role in Mufasa surviving, trauma that Mufasa faces early on, and so Taka really starts out in as a wonderful character. So I really tried to give him a again a happy, uh, loving theme, and uh, and then I do then spin that as the film goes on, and different things happen. I start to transition that my theme into different places.
I think it sounds fascinating. And I think one thing because I luckily I had a chance to hear the music, which I thought was fantastic. Because
Oh, cool.
and like I said, I got listened to all the tracks. And I thought you did such a wonderful job with all the tracks. And one thing I found fascinating, I found a lot of things fascinating, but one of the things I found fascinating, I'm going to add as well, is that so you're utilizing a 95-piece orchestra,
Hmm.
and core and choirs, from both South Africa and the West.
Hmm.
So, how did you incorporate inspirations from both South Africa and the West in your music?
Yeah. Well, this I'll start with South African because again, living in The Lion King for as long as I have, I mean, that was one of the huge sounds of the stage version was well, a lot of the cast were South Africans. And so and the leader of that wave was Lebo M, who's a great friend of mine that we've known, gone through a lot together over the decades. And so Lebo, I always consider Lebo to be the voice of the Lion King. And so, we I that is a core sound of the Lion King in my world is that South African choral sound. So when we recorded the choir, it was great because Lebo was there. And Lebo has this great way of working with that group. And we recorded in London. And one of the cool things was that virtually all of the members in the that South African chorus had been on the West End London version of The Lion King. So they all knew, the vibe and the sound and what we're going through. But there's one specific example I can think of that I had written a theme for Kiara, which is Blue Ivy's character. She's the voice of Kiara, and Kiara is kind of a through um, arc character in the film, and she's actually Mufasa's granddaughter. And so I wrote a theme for her. But then at the end of the film, I wanted to kind of take it to a different place. And so what we did is Lebo and I got together in the studio with the South African chorus, and I played Lebo then my theme for Kiara. And then Lebo just sort of sat there for a little while and he was thinking and thinking, and he's so great. And I could see him, the wheels spinning, and then we go out together to the studio where the singers are. And then he just starts singing a line that is essentially my melody, but though in Lebo's interpretation of it, which is this cool, amazing thing. And he'll just sing along, he'll just be singing, and then he'll point like at a group of like a couple of people, of singers, and they'll start singing the line. And so that's how he taught them the parts. And then they keep singing and keep repeating that phrase over and over. And then he starts singing another line and he points at another group of people and they sing that new line. And it's just this layer of material that he just comes up with. So it was so cool because to have Lebo do what he does to A Piece of Mind was just like, it was magical. And it was just like I was going, oh my gosh, this doesn't get any better than this. And so that was kind of the South African choral element, very critical and important for the whole sound of the Lion King. And then transitioning to the Western chorus or the Western choir, I had a 40 voice group there as the London Voices, and so they give kind of that cinematic vocal weight and scope and width and depth that when you really want that epic kind of a choral sound in certain moments that I'm sure you heard when you listened to the cues, some of the cues, that's was the card I was playing for that was just this big, giant choral sound, and then ending up at the 95 piece orchestra, then you know that's kind of like a dream come true too, right? And a lot of times I'll usually write for orchestras in the 80, 85 kind of piece size, but to have that extra weight on 95 pieces, and we recorded in Air Lyndhurst, which is an incredible studio in London, and the musicians are the best in London. They're amazing musicians, and so that's like, yeah, how can you ask for anything more? When you add all that up together, and we haven't even talked about the specialty woodwind flute instruments, that I got to record, and the groove percussion, all of the hand percussion instruments and stuff. So it was just this massive amount of musical brilliance that I had at my disposal, and I was so thankful for all of that, and just a blast.
That sounds so awesome. And I think one thing that I mentioned is to refer back to a part of the conversation we had earlier, okay?
Hmm.
When you mentioned how when you write, you're hearing the music in your head. Now, I'm, obviously some of the West African instruments may not be the most familiar. So how were you, I guess, hearing the range of these instruments that you may not have been as familiar with and still fit it in perfectly with the Western music you're connecting to? And the Western and South the African parts that you introduced, they're just beautiful. I mean, there's so many beautiful
Oh.
pieces. And the gentleman you're talking about and his singing, which because it wasn't in English, it just sounds like its own beautiful instrument. So
Hmm.
how are you writing with with the voice and the lyrics and all that in these instruments that are maybe not as familiar to you as maybe the Western ones would be?
Hmm. And I'd actually sort of come back that the fact is they're all extremely familiar to me because I've been living in this world for 30 years, and there were no instruments I used on Mufasa that I haven't written for many, many times already in my career. And I guess that's one of it's kind of a drag sometimes being older, but this is a case of where being older is kind of nice because I've been around a long time, and I've had the chance to utilize there wasn't anything new that I used. So I was deeply familiar with every single instrument that I use, including, as you said, Lebo. His voice is an instrument, and again, I've had the joy and pleasure of being with him for almost 30 years now. So, so so it was all very familiar, and if you look at my credit list, I've worked on a lot of projects over my career that have had different cultures, touchstones, and so I'd also sort of say that that's been a something that I've had a lot of experience with just overall of incorporating different sounds. On Moana 1, I wrote every note of that as an orchestrator or additional music composer and stuff. So, and going back to Tarzan was another. I was in Africa. So Tarzan, it was almost hard to separate out Tarzan from Lion King because they're in the same continent and a lot of the same instruments, but that was its own kind of challenge. But I guess the point being, I've that's been a big cool joy that I've had over my career, that I've gotten to work with all these different colors and learn them all quite well.
Well, one of the pieces I want to talk about that is that I really like on the score. I'm gonna butcher the pronunciation of the name, so please correct me. All right, here's my shot, and they tell me and fix it for me.
Okay.
Kugendile.
Uh, that actually is. Are you talking about the Q name? The name of the Q?
Kugondile.
The key to learning how to pronounce it is to listen to the track. And Lebo is actually singing the word that Lebo sings a lot. That's the word.
Oh, okay, gotcha, gotcha.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm so sorry I can't remember. I'm
Oh, no
I'm
worries, no
freezing up
worries.
on it, but that's the key to learning how to pronounce it properly.
Well, I'll go back and check out because like I said, I mean, I know I'm butchering the name, I mean, anyone who watches the show knows I butcher names all the time, but I know I'm butchering this one. And I think, like I said, one of those pieces I think that did catch my attention because it did offer the language as the music part of the music,
Right,
and
right.
I think it's just incredible how you guys use like the melody of the human voice as an instrument, and I just want to kind of go into the choices you made to do that.
Mhm.
When did you decide that the voice itself is your instrument that you're going to compose with?
Hmm. Yeah, and honestly, that comes down again to it's the brilliance of Lebo, you know, and because Lebo has he was again in the 94 um, animated film, right? Lebo was heard throughout that film too. So you kind of know when you're working in this world, you know that Lebo is an invaluable resource, or and it's not just looking at him as something to be manipulated. The fact is he brings it he brings that to the project. He brings Lebo, which is the voice of the Lion King. So there are moments when I'm sitting there and I'm thinking very specifically, I would love Lebo to sing this, or I would love the choir to sing this part. There are parts that I would write out, traditionally, for that choir, the South African choir to sing. But I think one of the things that I learned a long, long time ago is let Lebo do his thing, And so sort of say, Lebo, I would love you to sing in this spot, and then let him do it, let him do the thing and his thing, because he's going to come up with something so much better and so much more organic than I ever could. And I think that's a great example for all of us, right? Of being open to input from others, and cooperating together, and looking at whatever you come up together is going to be stronger than what we all come up with individually. So it's a really community is what it comes down to, and in this case it's just a musical community that we've formed together.
And I like that. The music, like I said, is incredible. Another one I really enjoyed was called the Race.
Oh.
Basically, once again, you're utilizing the strength. You're using those strings to convey so many varied emotions in just in that one piece. So,
Mhm.
why did you choose strings as the backbone of this particular piece?
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that cue, because that actually is my favorite cue of the of the film that I wrote. So I'm glad to hear that. So honestly, so at the very beginning of the project, when I was brought in, I had a meeting with Barry Jenkins, who's the director, and we sat for a day and just sort of talked about music and talked about the different scenes that were already existing at that point. And one of the ones we talked about was the race, that scene. And he just told me he wanted it to be this very action driven, um, and I'll say it, he actually said John Williams kind of cue. He wanted that was my chance to be John Williams, and John Williams has been my idol since I was 16 years old, so that was the easy place for me to go to. But so that was really my inspiration on that. I just sort of thought I tried to put myself in, well, if I was John Williams, how would I score this scene? And so that's what I really did in the first half of that cue in particular. Then the second half of the cue, where it sort of changes tone. I don't know if you remember the cue that well, but it does change into a more legato kind of string motion. And that's a case of where, as we were talking earlier, I used I used a bit of Lin's song, I Always Wanted a Brother. And I used, so that if you listen, you'll hear the first half of my melody is actually the first couple of notes of Lin's song. But then the next few notes, I go off into a whole different place, which is my compositional contribution in that little segment. And the reason I did that is we haven't heard the song yet. The song I Always Wanted Brothers actually comes directly after that cue, after
Mm.
the race. So you can't like give away the whole song, in the cue before it. But I wanted to have somehow to tie those two characters, Mufasa and Taka, together. And that seemed like the logical way to kind of go, was to kind of precede the song and give a little bit of a hint of it, but without giving it all away. And yeah.
Now the one part, now, is this quite possible that this part's all in my head? I might have just, somehow heard something off, but the part that I felt when I was listening to the race, right? I
Mhm.
went back and I went back to the track from The Lion King, right?
Oh, uh-huh.
Listened to the track from the Stampede, and I could have
Mm.
sworn I heard some musical callbacks to the Stampede from the original Lion King. Am I crazy, or was that there?
You are not crazy at all.
Okay,
Um,
thank God.
and that's another great example. So the way I look at scoring a film like Mufasa, where it's a prequel, but it's part of a world, and as we talked earlier, you can't ignore those great Hans Zimmer themes, right?
Hmm.
But you don't want to just use them throughout the whole film. And so I'll say this, there may or may not be a flashback in the race.
Okay.
And so when there may or may not be a flashback in the race, that was the moment I wanted to use something that harkened back to the original Lion King. So it's very short. It's only a few seconds, in actuality. But that's a part of my job in a film like this to tie everything together, which is why I was brought into this project to begin with, is that I had the knowledge of the past, but I also have the ability to go into the future as well. And but a part of that responsibility is to give the nods to the past when you need to. And that was a very astute observation of yours to pick up on that, especially without seeing the film.
Right,
So,
right. Those I was wondering about because, like I said, because I listened to prepare for the interview. I kind of just sat and just listened to the entire score that the soundtrack that was provided for me. And when I heard that piece, I thought I heard something, so I went back to the Stampede and I listened to it again to see if I was really right. I was
mhm.
pretty sure, unless I was going, sort of a little off in my head maybe on it, but I was pretty sure I heard it, and it
You
was
got
there.
it.
So not having ever seen the film, yeah, I'm going to because my wife is dying to see this movie.
Uh,
Um, because I mean, so I'm not sure exactly what the race refers to,
mhm.
in the film. So when you're thinking about the Stampede, is it a callback to just the energy of the Stampede? Is it a callback to, because obviously that's the scene where he dies? Is the race something that is something he is choosing to participate in? Is this, you know what I'm saying? Like what, like
I
how are you
am
connecting all this?
I am dying to be able to tell you, but I
All
really can't, because if
right,
I
all
do,
right.
it's going to spoil your experience and it's going to spoil your listeners' experience. And so Jeff, I really wish I could, but I really feel like I should just
No,
let that be a discovery. And
no,
yeah.
no worries, no worries. I totally I believe in no spoilers, so I appreciate you hitting the brakes on that just a little bit. So now I'm really curious. Now when I watch it, I'm going to be like, I see what he did there.
You know what? And let me know. Drop me a line
Will
or whatever
do.
after you've seen it. I would love to hear how you feel when you have a chance to see it. That'd be great.
I absolutely totally will because like I said, I'm definitely going to be seeing it in theaters because like I said, my wife has like been like this movie, this movie, this movie. We're definitely going to see
Right.
this one. Now
Awesome.
another piece I found really kind of interesting, and I found it interesting not just musically, but I feel like there's a lot going on in the title, and I explain the one I'm thinking about. It's a piece called "Burden of Pride." Now,
Mhm.
obviously, there's pride can be used in multiple different ways, especially because we're dealing with a lions and what a pride is, plus pride as being in an aspect of our own arrogance.
Mhm.
So, when you are you intentionally implying both pride of lion and the pride in both, and when you're looking at it from a point of view of being a burden, how did you kind of incorporate, I assume, the overall themes of rebuilding with the pride of these lions and everything else, and that
Mhm.
other aspect where of the negative connotations of pride.
Mhm. Well, I would say that probably 80%, if one could put a number on it, is actually referring to pride as in the group of lions.
Okay.
There is, though, a little element of the pride, and it really has to do with the development of Mufasa and his there's I think I can say he ends up having a lot of responsibility, right? We all know that at the end of the day, where where Mufasa ends up and the Lion King starts. Mufasa has a lot of a lot of pride and a lot of responsibilities, and so there's a little bit that goes into just Mufasa's development as a character. And again, I don't really want to get too deep into that because I think I would actually probably be giving away things that again I want people to just have that the beauty of discovering it and making their own in conclusions because
Hmm.
I'd also sort of say that there are some different interpretations and some things that different people might have. And so, but the majority of that title does refer to the group of lions.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Like I said, I really like what you do with that. And the other thing I'm kind of curious about, there's a sound that caught my attention, and I don't know the instrument, but it happens around the 1 minute and 50 second mark of that track. It's like it's a wind instrument. I can't place it, but it's definitely there, and I'm trying to figure out. what it is and how you came to use it.
So actually, what that instrument is it's a woodwind instrument, and that was my specialty woodwind player playing it. She was amazing. Her name's Eliza Marshall, and she's just the stunning player. All of that sound that you hear throughout the soundtrack is her. And so, but that was just one of her flutes. I am not exactly sure which one it was, but it's a low woodwind and she played it several times throughout the film. The way that it usually works with specialists like her is I write the parts, and then she finds the instrument that it fits key wise because all of these instruments they aren't chromatic instruments like Western instruments are. You can't play every half step or
Hmm.
whatever. They only play certain keys, so she has to find the right instrument, and then she'll usually play a couple of examples for me, and I pick the one that I think sounds the most evocative or the best. And that was exactly what happened in that. So I can't tell you. I don't know. We could ask Eliza and find out which one she used, but it's beautiful, isn't it? It's such a
Yeah,
beautiful sound. Yeah,
it's like every so often, like when I hear a great piece of music, there's this sometimes there's just that little piece that just pops up and it's like that is fascinating, and that's
right.
just part of grabbed my fascination
Oh,
with
so
that
glad to hear
with
that.
that piece.
And I'd also like to point out that's Taka's theme then. So that's my theme for Taka, but in as he's gone at the beginning when we first see him, as we were saying, talking about, I have it playing that theme playing on marimbas and kind of bright and perky and happy. And in this instance, it's Taka's theme, but in a in a little more melancholy way. So yeah. Oh,
Uh,
cool. I'm glad you enjoyed that.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
like I said, it was a phenomenal soundtrack that you created because it did a lot. It did a lot, and none of the pieces in that I can remember in the score were all that long. Usually they're about a minute, 2 minutes, maybe at most three. But he did so much within each piece. You harken back to the Lion King. You had those beautiful African melodies. You have just the Western. It is doing a lot in very small units of music, I feel
Wow.
like.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And it'll be interesting when you see it. There's it's all strung together, right? And so that it's one thing when you listen to a soundtrack, in isolation where it's just the music and
Yeah.
you hear like a piece of music and then you have a pause and then you go to the next piece of music, right? But it's going to be interesting when you see this film, there are going to be stretches of 15 minutes maybe where there's no break in the
Oh
music where it's
wow.
that no, it's not that way the whole way through.
Right.
But
Right.
there are some of these cues are actually, when you'll see them, they're actually pieced together and then run can congruently, whatever the word would be. Yeah, yeah.
Well, like I said, what he did was absolutely brilliant. Now for the listeners, where can they get their hands on the score of Mufasa? And then what's next for you?
Yeah. I think the best way at this point is the score elements are on the deluxe version. Disney, when they do these musicals like this, they have two releases. Usually one is the songs only, and then the deluxe version has the songs and the score. And so if they want to hear my score, please head to the deluxe version. You can find it in Spotify, Apple Music, kind of anywhere that you would normally be listening to music. I'm not sure if there's going to be a physical CD release. I only say that because I don't know. Nobody's told me if it's going to come out on a physical piece or not, but I would hope it would, and people would then be able to buy a CD copy as well. And regarding what's going on next, it's actually kind of interesting where I've had a 20-year stretch of where I've not had something that I've had to work on, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Where, and a lot of that stretch, there's been four, five, six projects going on at the same time that I've had to juggle. But this is the first time now where I'm calling it fun employed, where where I don't have anything actually solid on my plate, and so I'm just going to enjoy a little bit of a rest. I've been approached about a couple of things, but I haven't committed to anything yet. And so, but the most important thing right now is I'm pretty I I'm a bit tired, and I'm looking forward to just having a bit of time with my wife and go and see. I have a new grandson and go and spend
Congratulations.
some time with him. Thank you very much. And so that's my immediate plan. And in the future, Jeff, I never know, like, am I retired or not, right? It could be all over for me after this, and I hope there'll be something else to come, but that's my future at the moment.
Well, I definitely hope there is. Mr. Metzger, it was an absolute honor speaking with you. You're a pleasure. You're obviously extremely well versed, and like I said, whatever you do next, come on the show and talk about it because like I will always appreciate hearing from you and about music.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I really appreciate it. It's a joy to speak with you as well.
Thank you. Have a fantastic night, sir.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Furnace Stars Podcast. Please like and subscribe. Turn for the next episode when we celebrate the end of the year show with Barney Smith and Kurt Sasso. Until next voyage, travel on.